Yo, what's up, everybody? Hey, what's happening? I hope you guys are doing okay. We got a great show for you today. Gonna talk about some really cool things. You know, something that is really near and dear to me. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's just rock a little bit. Yes. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome. I am happy to be back. You know, after the holidays, you know, things kind of slowed down, you know, and so I'm now getting back into the hot seat. And, man, I'm excited. So anyway, welcome back to the Longevity Game podcast. I'm Michael Ward, the founder and CEO of Next Level TRT, and we're a longevity and performance medicine practice franchise based in a little town right outside of Fort Worth, Texas, right? And I'm also your guide through the world of hormone optimization, performance medicine, peptides, and longevity science. And if you've never been here, if you've never listened to any of our episodes, every week what we do is we take a look at the news and breakthroughs that shape or are shaping the future of human health so that you can fight off Father Time and stay happy and healthy for years to come. That's the goal. So before we get started today, though, I want to share something that just recently happened. It was genuinely, it made me smile. It was cool and a little funny, you know, but mostly cool, right? So I got an email a few days ago, right? And it was from a podcast analytics firm. And apparently, the Longevity Game podcast is ranked number 44 in health and fitness in South Korea. Now, I couldn't believe it. I was like, man, South Korea. I don't speak Korean, you know. I've never been to Korea. But somehow, someone over there is listening to us talk about hormones and longevity and health optimization, you know. And that's pretty wild. And honestly, it's pretty cool. You know, my oldest son, I have 5 sons, right? My oldest son, Jacob, is a tech sergeant in the United States Air Force. And he's currently in Alaska. And so he is about to actually transfer over to South Korea. There's a base in South Korea. There's actually 2 bases, I think. And he's going to be going over there. And so, you know, it looks like I'm going to South Korea to visit, you know, so that'll be fun. You know, what's crazy, like if I go to South Korea and people are like, hey, there's Michael Ward from the Longevity Game podcast. I mean, I'm going to be blown away. It's wild. I mean, it's just 44, right? But it's ranked 44 on Apple iTunes podcast, and so, yeah, well, that's a start, right? How cool is that? You know, and it's also a reminder that like conversations about health and longevity and performance are universal. You know, whether you're in Texas or Seoul, you know, people want the same things, you know. They want to feel better. They want to live longer. They want to perform at higher levels for as long as possible, you know. And so that's exactly what today's episode is about, especially if you're 40 years or older, all right? So if you're 40 years old or older, this is especially pertinent for you, okay? But if you're not 40 years old or older, this is still going to be some good stuff. I'm still going to cover some cool stuff. It's cool stuff. And I'm just now getting over to something, you know, like I don't usually have allergies in the wintertime, but I'm thinking that I have some allergies going on. Like my nose has been running and I've been sneezing like crazy. I don't feel bad. My throat doesn't hurt. I don't have like sinus congestion. It's just a runny nose and a sneeze it just happens so frequently. I'm getting sick of it. And so, anyway, forgive me for all the sniffling. Okay. So, you know, whenever most people think about aging, you know, they think about something that suddenly breaks one day, you know, a heart attack, you know, a stroke, maybe a fall or some kind of diagnosis, right? But that's not really how it works. You know, aging doesn't happen just like that, right? It's insidious, right? Aging is slow. It's quiet, you know, it's cumulative, right? And so, you know, longevity doesn't usually fail suddenly. It breaks down, it erodes, quietly. When key systems are neglected, like muscle and strength and bone density and hormones and metabolic health and recovery is a big one, and so one of the biggest misconceptions in health is that aging automatically means decline, right? Aging is inevitable, yes, but rapid decline is not. I worked with a guy in the ICU whenever I was working as an ICU nurse practitioner at one of these big hospitals here in Fort Worth. And this guy, really good friend of mine, his name's John Eno. Cool guy, one of the best ICU nurses I've ever worked with. And, one day he says to me, he says, Mike, you know what? These days, everybody has to get old. We all have to age. But we don't have to feel like it, And I was like, man, you're right. You are right. We have too many tools at our disposal and too much knowledge out there that can help us to mitigate the effects of aging. We have to age, right? The years are going to come, but what we do to push off that feeling old, we can do that. These days are just too much that we can do to help stave off the aging process, right? And so we're going to talk about that stuff. All right, so in the medical literature, what we see over and over again is that, people don't lose independence because of one single disease, right? They usually lose it because of frailty, right? Because of muscle loss, because of weakness, right? Because they just don't have, they no longer have physical reserve, right? To recover from stress, stress on the body, and so there's a term for this process, it's called sarcopenia. I don't know if you guys have heard of sarcopenia, and which it's really just a fancy word for age-related muscle loss, right? And here's the part that surprises most people. It starts way earlier than you think, often it's in our 30s, right? But definitely in our 40s. And if you don't do anything about it to slow it down, it gets really bad. As a matter of fact, after your 40s, and I read this the other day, and I read it by somebody who was very, I guess, they're a person that wouldn't just make numbers up, right? But what they said is that after your 40s, you lose about 30% of your muscle mass per decade, right? And that compounds over time. That is horrible. That is horrible. So you gotta start lifting weights today, not just to look good, right? And so once that muscle's lost, everything downstream suffers, right? Your balance worsens. Blood sugar, your blood sugar is the control, your blood sugar control is worse. And what I mean by that is because, strength muscles help to regulate your metabolism and help to regulate the way your body handles and stores glucose, right? And so blood sugar control worsens, right? And bone density declines. Whenever you're building muscle, you're not just strengthening muscles, you're strengthening your bones. Ladies, pay attention. This is super important for you guys. Also fall risk increases. Man, if you get weak and you're older and you're not lifting weights, you probably have decreased bone mineral density. If you step off a curb and you break your hip, man, that could be a death sentence. I've seen it time and time again in the ICU. You got to have strength, and then also your recovery time lengthens, right? So you break your hip, my gosh, it's going to take forever to heal. It's going to take forever to recover. And it just doesn't get easier the older you get to build muscle. You got to start today. And this is why longevity medicine, it's not about hacks. Longevity is built, right? Slowly, intentionally, and consistently. And that's the key, consistently. It's longevity. It's not about living as long as possible at all costs. I mean, who cares how long you live if only half your body's working, If you have to have people come and wash you and clean you up, every time you use the restroom on yourself, right? You know what I mean? It's not about living a long time, but it's about staying strong and mobile enough and resilient enough to enjoy the years you already have, or the years that you have left, So, if there's one intervention that stands above everything else for longevity after 40, it's resistance training. It is so, so important, and you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to go nuts, and we'll get into that. And it is, and besides, there's all kinds of things you can do, but not cardio alone, right? Not supplements, not biohacks. It is strictly strength training. You have to be in the gym building muscle, and it's not 7 days a week, right? Muscle is not just about aesthetics, right? Yeah, they look good. It looks really nice whenever you're just completely chiseled, right? But muscle is a metabolic organ, right? It helps, like I said, it helps to regulate blood sugar. It stabilizes your joint or supports your joints. It helps to, helps your posture. It protects the nervous system. And most importantly, it preserves your independence. Think about this. No matter how old you are right now, when you retire and you're no longer having to work, you have, money saved up and you're retired, right? Right now you're picturing what retirement looks like, and you're like, man, I'm going to do all these adventurous things. It's going to be awesome. Well, you have to be strong to do those things, right? In order to be independent, you have to be able to take care of yourself. You got to be strong. And like I said, that muscle mass that declines 30% every decade after 40s, that comes pretty quick, And so the best time to plant a shade tree, have you ever heard of this? There's two best times to plant a shade tree, 100 years ago and today, right? And so today, start it today. Study after study shows that, higher levels of muscle mass and strength, things like grip strength, are associated with, or strongly, really strongly associated with a lower all-cause mortality. And this means that the stronger you are, the less risk of dying from any disease or non-disease. Right. So in simple terms, people who are stronger live longer and live better. Right. You can go to Google Scholar and just type in grip strength and longevity and just check out some of the studies. It's really, really wild. But your grip strength is just a really good measure of your overall total body strength, But also think about it. If you fall and you don't have the strength to grab a hold of something, or pick yourself up, that's a bad thing. For women especially, resistance training becomes really critical after menopause. And ladies, once you stop making estrogen, if you don't immediately get on hormone replacement therapy, you can start seeing bone mineral density decline, right? You can start having osteopenia, which progresses to osteoporosis, which then progresses to eventually fractures, right? You have an increased risk of fractures. And that's no good. That's no good. So, if you just lift weights just a few days a week, it's just one of the most powerful tools that we have to slow down the process. And something else, I saw something the other day, and I'll have to talk about it on the next podcast. But I saw a study on women who perform resistance training a few times a week and how much it mitigates the risk of Alzheimer's disease. That's another thing. Strength training is just so important. And so I want to clear up a few common fears. Two things. First, this is for the ladies. Lifting weights is not going to make you look less feminine. All right? A lot of women I've talked to, they're like, well, I don't want to bulk up. I don't want to get too bulky. I don't want to look like a guy, That is not going to happen, First of all, it's not going to happen overnight. You're going to wake up and you're like, swole up, like Arnold. And plus, you have to work out a specific way to really look manly, To pack on muscle, you got to do it a specific way. And so, ladies, I promise, once you start lifting weights, if you've not tried, you're going to look, you're going to look so toned. You're going to be strong. And trust me, the other ladies are going to be like, wow, what are you doing? and it's going to feel amazing, right? And again, it's not about aesthetics, but I don't want you to worry that you're going to be more, masculine and less feminine if you start working out, right? And then the second fear is heavy lifting. Heavy lifting is not dangerous after 40, all right? What's dangerous is poorly programmed training, and that's dangerous at any age, right? Not just after 40s, all right? You don't need to train like a competitive athlete. You don't need to max out every session. You don't need to destroy yourself in the gym. That's not what it's about. Slow and steady gets the race. Remember I said consistency? Man, that's a big piece. 2 to 4 days per week of resistance training is enough to produce meaningful results, okay? You want to focus on compound movements, all right? Here's one, like bench press. Bench press is a compound movement. Deadlifts, that's a compound movement. Squats, again, you don't have to go crazy heavy. You can work up to it. Think about progressive overload, right? Progressive overload over time. So, and let's talk about that for a second. Progressive overload is like this set of, let's see, I'm going to do 3 sets. The first set, I'm going to do 45 pounds. The next set, I'm going to do 50 pounds. The next set, I'm going to do 55 pounds, right? And then the next time I come into the gym and I'm doing that same exercise, I'm going to try to go up a little bit. Maybe instead of starting at 45, maybe I'll start at 50, or if there's a weight in between there. Or maybe I'm going to start at 45, but instead of 10 reps, I'm going to get 12 reps this time. I'm just going to progressively overload, which will stimulate hypertrophy over time, and which is muscle mass. And that's the key. That's the key. So also you want to focus on good technique, doing it correctly. You don't want to be, so let's just say you're going to, flex your biceps, right? You're going to do a bicep workout. Don't do this to get the weight up. If you're having to do this to get the weight up, where you're jerking up with your shoulder, that's too heavy. Don't ego lift, right? Make it, if it's got to be light, and just slow down the movements. I tell people all the time, focus on the negative. Slow down the negative. The negative is also called the eccentric movement. Slow down the movement where you're coming back to resting position. I don't care how light something is. If you do that enough, slow that down or pause, you're going to feel it, and it's going to build a lot of muscle. Because the slower you go, the harder that you're trying to keep that weight from going down too fast. And you're recruiting all these extra muscle fibers to perform the lift, and that's going to stimulate hypertrophy, right? And then the last thing is, this piece is really, really important. You got to focus on recovery. You don't want to work out at 7 days a week, man. Your body needs a rest, and the older you get, the more rest you need. So focus on recovery. That our body, the best stuff happens when we're resting. That's whenever we recover. That's when actually we lose weight. Our muscles grow, all that stuff, right? That's the good part, recovery. And so after 40, recovery becomes just as important, really, as training volume. And so this is the key shift that people need to understand. After 40, muscle is no longer about aesthetics. It's about survival. We got it? All right. So next, let's see. Let's talk about nutrition. Because this is where many well-intentioned people get it wrong. And I have to say, you can eat right all week. And then on that one day, I might have a cheat day. And that one cheat meal turns into a cheat day. And then they've just derailed all the work they did all week, right? So, the diet's, it's really important. Nutrition is important. One of the biggest issues I see in adults over 40 is that they undereat protein and they're over-dieting their calories. They're cutting their calories too low, right? As we age, our muscles become less sensitive to protein. And this is called anabolic resistance, all right? And you guys need to look up at this. Look into this. That it means that the same protein intake that worked in your 20s may not be enough in your 40s, 50s, or 60s. Older adults generally require more protein, not less, to stimulate muscle repair and growth. And so I usually, there's some easy ways to do this, but I usually say, if you want to preserve muscle, you take in 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body weight. Or, if you want to build muscle, it's 1 pound up to 1.2, even now 1.3 grams per pound of lean body weight. The new food pyramid came out, and I think that they say it's, 3 to 4 grams per kilogram of total body weight throughout the day, split into 3 to 4 meals. And so it's just, most people are under eating protein. And there's too many easy ways to get protein these days. You can get it through, protein shakes. They have protein bars. In my clinic, I have a protein area. When you walk into the clinic, there's all these free protein, high protein snacks. I like Quest. Quest does it really great. I had a friend, they say they have 2 grams of net carbs on their protein bars, specifically the chocolate chip cookie dough one, which is amazing. If you throw it in the microwave for like 7 seconds, beautiful. It is delicious. Well, I wanted to test this thing out, Is it really 2 grams of net carbs? Because if it is 2 grams only, 2 grams of net carbs, then it shouldn't spike your blood sugar too much, right? And so I have a friend who wears a Dexcom, which is one of those sensors on the back of your arm, that checks, your spike in glucose, and it'll tell you whether or not your glucose is climbing. And so I said, hey, man, would you eat one of these bars and then track, your blood glucose? And he's like, yeah, man, sure. And he did. And it never spiked. The glucose never came up, And I was like, wow, look at that. It's true. 2 grams of net carbs. And so I think Quest is doing it right. So anyway, I like Quest bars. So I put a lot of Quest stuff in there, in the clinic. We have Quest chips. If you like chips, man, Quest chips, high protein chips. They have like Reese's cups. They look like Reese's cups. They're not Reese's cups. They're Quest cups, chocolate peanut butter cups, right? High protein, low carbs, delicious, right? I mean, there's just too many options out there, to choose. It doesn't have to be hard, right? I mean, you can always boil some eggs, have a couple of eggs with you, chicken, steak, all that stuff, sometimes you might have to do, some meal prepping, but there's really a lot of great snacks out there that are high protein that you can eat. And so, it does need to be distributed throughout the day, right? One giant protein heavy dinner doesn't offset low intake earlier in the day. All right. So you should know that. Also a little hack. This is pretty cool. And I've read this in a study about maybe a month ago. My gosh, it's already almost middle January. So it's probably been about 3 months ago, 2 or 3 months ago. So anyway, so at night, this is your catabolic window, right? This is where muscle protein synthesis does not occur, right? And so if you'll take in 30 to 40 grams of casein protein right before bed, and casein protein it's not the same as whey isolate. Casein protein is a milk protein, but it's a long-chain protein, right? So if you take in 30 to 40 grams of casein protein right before bed, you can increase muscle protein synthesis by 20 to 30%, respectively. That is huge because otherwise there's zero happening, right? So, because whenever you're asleep, casein, like I said, is a long chain protein. So if you take it at night before hitting the hay, the body will work on breaking down those amino acids and use it to build muscles. How about that? Now you have an extra 20 to 30% of muscle protein synthesis happening while you're asleep, right? Yes. Try it. Let me know how it works for you. Also, try some of those bars. Let me know how you like those. My favorite one is the chocolate chip cookie dough, followed very closely by the oatmeal raisin. Man, that's good too. Anyway, put them in the microwave for 7 seconds, and it is like chef's kiss. It's incredible. Tastes just like a oatmeal cookie or a chocolate chip cookie. It's fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about calorie restriction. All right, this is, like I said, some people undercut calories, right? So another major mistake is chronic calorie restriction. You know, many people, they spend years dieting, cutting calories, trying to stay lean or lose weight, you know, and they do this without realizing that prolonged undereating accelerates muscle loss, right? It slows metabolism and worsens hormonal health. And it's bad. And we see this in people who are on like GLP-1s for a long time, and they're not doing any, you know, they're not lifting any weights, you know, they're not prioritizing their protein. They're just not getting enough micro or macronutrients, right? And so if you want to age strong, you can't diet like you're trying to just disappear, right? You have to eat something, right? And preferably go hard on the protein. You know, and carbohydrates aren't the enemy either, right? I should mention carbs support training performance, you know, recovery and thyroid function. You know, dietary fats, all right? They're not the enemy either, okay? They are essential for hormone production and just really all overall cellular health, right? And so, you know, you have to have carbs, you have to have fats, you know, but obviously in moderation. You know, you want to go crazy on the carbs. And some people don't handle carbs as well as some other people, right? So I don't want to just cast such a wide net, you know, and just speak in absolutes. But, you know, for most people, those, you know, you got to have the carbs, they have to have the healthy fats, you know. You know, longevity nutrition it doesn't have to be extreme, right? It's supposed to be sufficient, right? It's balanced, you know, and sustainable, right? Anything that's just too extreme on one end or the other, it becomes unsustainable, right? Well, this brings us naturally to hormones. Hormones do not make you immortal, but hormone deficiencies absolutely accelerate aging. And it makes you feel god awful, right? Because as we age, levels of testosterone, ladies, estrogen, thyroid hormones, growth-related hormones, they all decline, you know? And so the question is not whether they decline, right? The question is how fast and how far, right? So one of the biggest mistakes people make is waiting until symptoms happen, right? Or the symptoms are just so severe that they decide, hey, I think I'm going to go check my labs. That's not a good idea. That is not a good idea. What you want to do is annual lab testing. You know, at least check your labs once a year. You know, annual lab testing should be viewed like preventive maintenance, not damage control. Okay? You know, there's a new company out there called Rhythm Health, and it's the coolest. They have got the coolest thing going. They have this little thing, you know, like the Dexcom that I was telling you about that checks your blood sugar, right? Well, it will actually check your labs by just attaching it to the back of your arm. And I did this, so I know exactly how it feels. It was painless. You just attach it to the back of your arm, and you leave it on there for about 3 minutes, and then it just collects blood in one little tube, and then you send it off, and they send you your results in just a couple days. And they send you one of these guys every month. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be every month, but you can do it every month, or you can just do it every now and then, you know, but it's super simple. You don't have to go into the lab. You don't have to get stuck. It is so easy. And so for people who have really bad veins, this is an excellent option. It just, like I said, just goes to the back of your arm. It just sits there, collects blood. You just pop it off and you send it in. Painless. And I can be a weenie sometimes, all right? Like, it's painless. It was cool. Anyway, so, you know, optimization, it means restoring physiologic balance, right? Monitoring labs and having medical oversight. That's what optimization is. It means individualized care. It means understanding risks and benefits. You know, we're not trying to make people superhuman, but we want to track these things. We want to know how we're doing. And if things start to get off kilter, right? If things start to go off the rail, it's better to know at the beginning than later on, you know? So anyway, we're just trying to keep you resilient, right? We want to keep you healthy and being proactive and just getting your labs, is a good option. It's a good first step, right? So now what are we doing? We're transitioning to our peptide spotlight. We started doing this here, I think about 3 episodes ago, where we do a peptide spotlight. I have so many people that are interested in peptides in my circle, and I also prescribe peptides. Like, you wouldn't believe how many peptide prescriptions that I send out every day. It's incredibly, it's an incredibly large number, right? And so what I want to do is, I want to go over a peptide. This is the peptide spotlight for this week. And so today we're talking about the peptide GHK-Cu. And this is an injectable copper peptide. So GHK-Cu is naturally occurring in the body, right? It's found in human plasma. It's found in saliva. And it's even found in urine. So interestingly enough, though, levels of GHK-Cu decline with age, right? And so this peptide has been studied for decades, primarily for its regenerative and restorative properties, and it's used topically a lot, right? GHK-Cu plays a role in tissue repair, collagen and elastin synthesis, even angiogenesis, which is the formation of new blood vessels. And the formation of new blood vessels helps with anti-inflammatory signaling. It helps with just kind of shuttling things to sites of injury that need repair, so it's an incredible peptide. So in simple terms, GHK-Cu, it helps the body repair and remodel tissue more effectively, and it'll make you look pretty, right? It will help improve the quality of your hair and your nails and your skin. Mechanistically, I don't know why I can't say that. Mechanistically? That is it, mechanistically. It binds copper ions, and it activates gene expression related to healing and regeneration. So while it does that, it's also down-regulating inflammatory and fibrotic pathways. So this isn't an anabolic compound, right? It's not going to enhance performance. It's not going to make you smarter. It's not going to reduce anxiety. It's not going to, cause you to run fast. It doesn't increase muscle mass directly. GHK-Cu is regenerative. It's not stimulatory, all right? But it's very, very a great peptide, and I've seen incredible results on this. Clinically, it's often used to support skin health, connective tissue integrity, and wound healing and recovery. So, common injectable dosing in educational terms is often around 1 to 2 milligrams subcutaneously, 2 or 3 times per week, right? Typically cycled rather than used continuously. And I think one of the things you need to take into account is that it does form new blood vessels. And so imagine if you had like a tumor, right, or something growing, you don't want to increase blood supply to that thing, right? And so that's something to consider. And always think about sourcing. Sourcing is very, very important. I never recommend people buying prescription drugs, including peptides, from online websites, right? So find a medical provider in your area that can prescribe peptides and go to that one, okay? It's, again, so GHK-Cu. It's not about pushing the body harder. It's about helping it repair smarter, all right? So I think that's about it, guys. We're pushing 35 minutes almost. But before we close, I want to address something really important, right? Bodybuilding and optimization culture. Over the past year, it's been estimated that roughly 50 competitive bodybuilders have died. And it's just, I couldn't believe it when I saw that number. That should give all of us a little bit of a pause, right? I, myself, am a competitive bodybuilder. I do one show a year, and a lot of people that listen to the podcast know this. But I only do it, I'm not trying to be a professional bodybuilder. I'm just trying to stay on task, on course. If I have something that I can aim at, I can stay on task, right? And so, and that's a good tip. If you want to really hit your goals, put something at the finish line that is just so amazing, just so incredibly awesome and exciting that it pulls you to the finish line. With me, it's bodybuilding. I'd say, I'm going to do this show. I'm going to tell everybody about it so I don't look like a chump. If if I decide not to do it, right? I tell everybody. And so now my feet I'm holding my feet to the fire, right? And so I will do the show, and it keeps me lean, it keeps me active, and it keeps me consistent, And so that's a good tip for you guys. If you want to stay on task, put something at the end of the goal that just really fires you up. Anyway, so, and I said all I'd say this. This is not an attack on bodybuilding, because like I said, I'm a bodybuilder. I love it. But it is a call for responsibility. There's a massive difference between health optimization, performance enhancement, and reckless polypharmacy, right? Unregulated anabolics and SARMs and peptides purchased online without medical oversight, that carries some serious risks, friends. Cardiovascular strain, kidney injury, arrhythmias, sudden death. These are serious business. This is serious stuff we're talking about. You can pursue physique goals and longevity at the same time, but only if safety comes first, guys. Longevity and recklessness don't coexist, okay? Eventually one wins. And if you're being reckless, it's usually that one, right? Anyway, that's it. So let's bring this home. Whether you're lifting weights for health, performance, or longevity, the goal is the same. Stay strong long enough to enjoy the life you're building. And whether you're listening in Texas or South Korea, or anywhere else in the world, thank you for being a part of the longevity game. If this episode helped you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And as always, go long. Thank you for joining me today. Stay intentional, stay informed as always. Take care. Be safe. If you have any questions, business inquiries, you'd like to sponsor an episode, or if you just want to be a guest on the show, send us an email. If you have a question or concern about a topic or a particular episode, hit us up at hello@thelongevitygamepodcast.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, be a guest at thelongevitygamepodcast.com. And if you're interested in supporting or sponsoring the show, just email us at sponsors@thelongevitygamepodcast.com. All right, guys, thanks so much, and we will catch you next time. Go long.